members are present. We had first, we're going to discuss the resolution 03-2023, which is updates the finance policy. The city Director Miller, can go ahead and give an overview.
So we originally approved these policies in 2016. We brought them back out. I had Brian Cooper review several of them. I had our consultants at Meter who work on our investing. They reviewed our deposits and investment policy. And then we added a new policy at the end with information provided by Director. So I'll kind of just walk you through those real quick. The first policy is the debt policy. And this basically guides when we will issue debt. The changes here is we added a section on voted general obligation debt, which is new to the city. Yes. We also added a section on income tax backed debt limits. So that's just talking about, we've issued bonds in the past, they were income tax backed instead of a voted measure. So that's a paragraph about that type of debt. And they added a section about managing the bond retirement unbalance. So these policies are just things that we use as a guide when we're developing the budget for fund balance purposes and when we're looking at when we should issue debt or when we should just pay cash. So those were the updates to the debt policy. The next policy is the cash reserve policy. And this is where we've established that our reserve is going to be 105 days or 28%. And this policy includes information, what if we go below 28%, then it has the steps that the city will follow. So when COVID-19 hit, where we thought, oh, we need to pull out that policy. Luckily, we didn't get to the point that we needed it, but this is what we would have followed if there were some kind of drastic change in our fund balances. We also added the Grandview Yard TIF fund in reference to a couple other funds that we may want to be watching the balance of. Typically, if a fund has debt, then we establish a reserve. The next policy is the investment and depository policy. The changes in here are basically just some wording that for all the investment brokers makes a lot of sense, and there isn't really any substantial change. The depository and investment policy is signed by all of the banks and investment advisors that we use. So they can see where we have certain requirements, city code and the Ohio Revised Code, and this just makes sure that they're aware. Fortunately, in Central Ohio, everybody we use is very familiar with all of these laws, but it's a good reminder for anybody we work with. Then the next policy is budgeting and financial planning. I don't know that there were any changes to this one. Oh, we referenced other special revenue funds at the end for inclusion in our capital budget. So our new TIF fund will eventually be part of our capital planning. Then the last policy is the brand new one, post-issuance compliance policy and procedures. And this is something that we've always followed. Typically, it's now somebody from Bricker makes sure that we're doing all of our post-issuance compliance. So when you issue debt, you have people that have bought that debt, you're required to report every year. They get our audit report. If something major would happen here, we would want to report that to them because it could impact the value of our debt and our ability to repay. So this is a lot of legal jargon that we're required to have included, but we have been following all of those procedures. So that is it, unless you have some questions for this ordinance. There weren't too many updates really.
Any questions or comments from committee members?
I just have a question. So I think there was 4 million in the non-voting, outstanding maybe. But is that, so that would be for the pool and I don't know, Wyman is paid off for.
Nice.
That outstanding.
Unvoted general obligation debt. So that would be the pool, the 2012 park improvement bonds, the public works bonds, And then for the facility at McKinley Avenue. And then there are also some in 2016, we issued some water and sewer, or street and sewer improvement bonds.
Okay,
So those would be income tax backed.
okay, great.
Any other questions from any other members?
I have just a quick
Go ahead.
question. Megan, was this part of a regular cycle, or was this triggered by a change to the subsidy and policy with the voted bond issue?
When we started looking at the voted bond issue, we thought it was a good idea to bring these back out and look at them again. Since it had been 6 years,
Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder if it's I wonder if it's wise to create a cyclical measure for this, whether it's triennial or something.
Yeah.
Just because it's not a matter of regular business for us. So I think it would be a good idea as council moves forward and as the city moves forward for this to be put into something that's, in front of those bodies every couple of years or so. I don't know
I
if
think
it's
that's great.
necessary on an annual
Yeah.
basis because it's pretty static. But, we went 6 years and it was triggered by an event.
Mhm.
But I think that, it's good to have it just as a matter of housekeeping to review it.
I agree. I think triennial is probably good because some people that weren't here in 2016 probably weren't familiar. I had them in the back of the budget book this year, but if you hadn't seen them, it's a great idea. We'll put that on our particular.
Thank you.
And I saw a couple of, two typos, and I don't know if you want me to mention that now or later, but, if you go to, we're both on page 3, the first page 3 for Exhibit A, under economic development and then general obligation support. Then, in the last sentence, where the improvements would not consistent, it just needs to be.
Yep.
And then the other one is on, page 3 of the Exhibit D. And then under capital budget, that first sentence, an annual capital budget will be prepared it should be approved by council.
Where was this at again?
So under Exhibit D, and then capital budget on the last page of Exhibit D, capital budget, that section, the first sentence, annual prepared, and then that would be and. That's all, thank you.
These are just technical, we don't need to amend. Okay. Any other questions?
And Megan, if I could just ask, where are these maintained? Are they just internal policies, or is there any reason to post them to any outside?
They're just internal policies, yeah. We'll provide them to Standard & Poor's. They've asked for them, so we'll provide them to them, but it's basically just an internal
There's
policy.
no real value in posting them to the public.
No other questions or concerns, I would move to recommend approval to council for this resolution.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we'll go on to ordinance 2023-05, which is appropriating portion of the monies were transferred out. We did at the end of Director Miller, if you want to go ahead and give background on that as well.
Yes. So in ordinance 2022-38, council approved transferring $6 million from the general fund to the general improvement fund. And also in that ordinance, you appropriated money for Hill and Associates, Rudy McHenry, and Myers out of that $6 million. So you appropriated $2,095,050. This ordinance is approving the appropriation of the remainder of that $6 million. So the $6 million minus the part that you've already appropriated gives us the $3,904,950. There are some blanks in here because the CMAR has not been finalized yet, so we don't have that information. We want council to do a reading tonight. We're not asking to suspend the rules, but this is just appropriating the balance of that $6 million, which will be used for the CMAR.
And the amount's $3,904,950.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions on this from members? This is pretty straightforward. This is just the remainder of the $6 million that we transferred at the end of the year, so I would move to recommend approval of council.
Second.
All-
Point of information, so should we, is that best practice to do that when we're missing some items in there? So some of the firm, but then also some of the figures leading up to the total amount on page 2?
This is such a reading, so I think you'll have the.
In my opinion, what you're approving is you're spending $3.9 million out of Fund 350 for capital improvements. This kind of has more information than is really required for you to approve. You're approving similar to the capital budget. You're approving $3.9 million of expenses for these buildings from capital outlay in Fund 350.
Okay.
And we planned on it going somewhere for these facilities anyway.
Right, and Liz included good detail. We like to do that, it gives you a little help on, you don't just see a big, huge number, but that's essentially what you're approving. So.
And then before the thought, just to make sure I'm on the same page, is before we would get to the third reading in the council packet, we'd have those items filled in the name of the CMAR.
I believe that's the plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the intent.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, I'm comfortable.
Can I ask on that, CMAR, is it Hill, like where it's Milt's firm, but that's,
Milt is the owner's rep, so
Oh,
he's gonna
gotcha.
work with help between the two. So then the CMAR is the construction manager at risk. That's the main contractor that's going to be taking care of the actual construction of the project.
Okay, thank you.
It's a form of construction management similar to, but not equal to, a general contractor.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. The last order of business is the proposed change to the Community Partners Funding Program. I believe Council President Keeler came up with this minor change. And this is basically not just organizations in Grandview, but would have an impact on the
Correct.
community.
Yeah, so looking at the actual old application, it didn't really specify that it had to be in Granby, but that's what we had always done. This just spells out who's eligible and who's not a little bit more, in order to use of these funds for the purpose that we have. I know we had funds left over, and I would rather see these go out into the community to make a difference rather than just reusing them for the next year. So looking, it's in the very end of the packet, you can see some suggestions I made. I formatted it so it's much more accessible for anyone using sites with sound kind of programming. A lot of the same questions, how you fund those sorts of things, but I changed it that organizations could now be nominated. And instead of having to have the organization apply, as an extra way to find organizations that are working within Grand Heights and how they might be able to use these funds. I do think because we're so small, we don't have a lot of 501c3s actually in the community, but we do have a lot of 501c3s that operate within our community, so making sure that we're still supporting local, but really opening it up to a wider range of organizations.
An example of that from last year would be, I guess, like the COGO.
So
Because that had an impact.
It was not a nonprofit, so they would not be able to get one of these.
Oh, okay.
But maybe there's a food pantry, or there's
Civic group.
a civic group, like the Tri-Village, like the Rotary Club or something like that. Or maybe it's what's the bike group? Yay Bikes. You know, they operate within Grandview, new programming in Grandview. It could be maybe an organization that donates books to the schools for diversity. I know they're getting books right now for that sort of thing. So it really can really expand on what this grant can do and who's eligible, so that we're putting the dollars out there to be used.
A couple
Yes.
of questions?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Chair.
Yeah,
Yes.
to the chair, for the chair. Where do we market, or where do folks find us right now, and how do we market it?
So it is under council. It's one of the menu items under council for the Community Partners Grant, and Aubrey periodically sends it out through social media for the grants are open with a general deadline of the end of October, so that there's time with meetings to get it appropriated for the end of the year.
Okay. I'm supportive. I just recognizing I work in the nonprofit space, so these are really small grants. The more that we can reduce the number of questions, I think, and the burden for folks to go through, right, how much they have to write out, the steps they have to take will probably be something that would increase accessibility. And then I don't know if we're able to do something like a Google form, looking over at Aubrey, if we could do something like a Google form that makes it very easy for someone to complete something online. I think that might be
So
a way to increase folks'
the Google
access.
forms are not as accessible.
They're not
They're not
okay.
as,
So
for when you're thinking about ability, because it doesn't work with some of the I just took a whole lot.
yeah, okay, I get you. Unlike that,
Yeah,
I was just talking general accessibility, but for people
Yeah.
with disabilities and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So totally. Okay.
Yeah.
And we do have a form that functions almost identical to a Google form.
Okay.
That's actually with our website, which has some of those accessibility provisions built in. So that would be something very similar to what we do for any community volunteers, like we do for Parks and Rec. We have used it in a variety of ways, but we do it that way, which essentially it still sends the information that's downloadable into an Excel sheet. It's very
Okay.
easy.
Awesome. Okay, that's just my feedback, but I'm supportive of the changes in the form that you put this into and kind of standardizing it, making it more accessible.
And I have a question. I know that, I think I had asked last year, but it's, if the money isn't used, then it's not a cumulative account that's held. Have you thought of keeping it, like to accumulate that money? I don't know if you got somebody the following year who, or maybe you didn't have anybody one year, but the following year you had 3 people show up and.
so we have, was it 5,000?
5,000.
5,000 that we put in there every year. I don't know if we've ever used all 5,000 up. The rolling it over, I'm not sure, because that could go to other things. And we don't really typically roll anything over for
We
anything
can't.
else. So
We have to close out the books every year.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe, if I may, that council gave a $10,000 grant one time to the band parents for band uniforms.
We-
Probably was done like at the end of 1 year, beginning of next or something.
Yeah, and it's our discretion. 5,000 is that's an appropriate amount based upon experience, but if a request comes in for more than that, it's still up to council's discretion at that time to make a determination. And yeah, it's the end of the year.
It's the end of the year, and so anything up to that 5,000 is just a voice vote, and anything over that you'd have to appropriate with the
Right, we'd have to
ordinance.
appropriate.
So, I mean, we can always go above and beyond if there's something that we feel warrants that. But this way, we know we have that 5,000 set aside each year to help organizations in the community.
Yeah, and there's no process to it. It's an application, they come to council, and like you said, it's a voice vote to approve. It doesn't have readings, it doesn't have legislation attached to it.
Okay, thanks.
Building on that, would we want to make it read 500 to 5,000? Or do we say somewhere else that 5,000, because
So, yes, I
if
want
we
to
have
know that.
low applications, right, low expressions of interest, then maybe we would want people to know that we actually could award up to $5,000. I realize that's not average though.
But we don't know that. If you're the first person to apply, there's $5,000 left. If you're the third person to apply and everyone else before you got 1,000, then there's only 3,000 left. So that would always be accurate. I put out the range of what we typically give for grants.
Mhm.
And again, we can always go above and beyond. People are more than welcome to ask for whatever they want, and they usually do, right? But I think it depends on the ask of the organization.
There's usually a dialogue as well, once
Yeah,
someone
yeah.
establishes the basis for a request.
Mhm.
You know, there's guidance from either council member or staff as to, here's what you can do. So it's not blind and, unguided. Typically, we know what's
Mhm.
coming in some form or another. But I do
And
agree
it's
that
not holding people back.
I agree, it's
yeah.
kind of, it's a little bit of a deterrent because we've got to go through this process. And if you're saying in advance that, oh, you might get $500, I mean, you guys work with the grant world a lot more than I, that's for sure. But it is a little bit, it can be looked at the other way as I'm not going to go through the process for 500, not thinking that they might be able to request 2,000 or 5 or whatever. So,
Right.
I
It
get it.
depends on the organization. Some organizations, $500 is their entire budget for the year, and other folks, it would be gone in a second, right? So it depends on the organization as well, and the size of their program.
And I have another question. How long has this grant been around, and has it always been $5,000?
Oh gosh, it's been as long as I've been on council.
Probably about 8 years,
Yeah.
from memory. I mean, I think it was established to put a little process around people's kind of requests to have some criteria around it.
Yep, to formalize it.
Formalize
Yeah,
it.
then get documentation on it. Because prior to this, it would literally, it would just be, hey, and we would just, casually, and not for significant amounts again, but it would be a very casual request and come in, tell us about it, okay, here you go, here's X amount. But there was a group that doesn't operate in Grandview Heights, and that triggered a policy structure, so
That was about, 2014
probably 10 years ago, yeah.
And then, but it's always been at 5,000. And so
Mhm.
I don't know if there's been a thought of increasing it since it's been that amount of time, 8 years. I understand some years nobody's claiming it, and that we could appropriate
We
more
could
if we wanted,
appropriate.
but.
Yeah, I don't think all 5,000 has been used the entire time I've been here. The only time it's gone above that was the 10,000 for the band uniform. So I would say if there's a demand, that would make sense to look at in the future, but if we're not using it now, I'd say try to really focus on getting the word out there that it's there and available and create the demand, and then we can revisit how much is appropriate.
Thank you.
Any other words want to program, it might have been a state check, was when the high school built that wellness facility. We did 10 there,
So
so.
appropriated, but I might be wrong.
It was
Yeah,
specific,
that
that was in the
outside,
budget.
yeah, so-
Okay, well, I mean, I am in complete agreement in favor for expanding the accessibility to organizations that, you know, would have an impact here in the community. Do we recommend this is not
Oh, yeah, this doesn't
legislation?
require council action, I think you guys took it up under other business last time, right?
Yeah,
so
it's on
just-
other business again, so we can just reduce it.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns about this? If not, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
I invited the crowd.